Hello again, and welcome to George's Path Through Improvisation. I'm George Stracombe, and in this lesson, I'd like to show you how to form jazz scales with a technique that's easy to understand and even easier to remember. Now, some of you may be asking yourself, what exactly are jazz scales? Well, basically, they're particular scales which contain tones that blend or match with particular jazz chords. Tonal blend is an important element of improvisation, and it occurs when the tones of the melodic ideas that you improvise blend or match up with the background chords over which you are improvising. If you don't get the tonal blend right, the ideas you create, no matter how expressive, will be dissonant and difficult to listen to. Tonal blend is easy to achieve in pop music because it's a type of music that often has a harmonic background which uses the chords from a particular key along with a melody based on the pentatonic scale from that same key. A pentatonic scale will blend with the basic chords from its key, just like this C pentatonic scale blends with the basic chords from the key of C. It's easy to improvise when one single scale blends with all of the moving chords below. Tonal blend in jazz, however, presents more of a challenge because its harmonic background uses more complex chords that go way beyond the basic triads from a particular key. And oftentimes when improvising jazz, you need to change scales as the chords change. Let's take a quick look at a few jazz chords with C as a root tone. C7, C minor 7, C major 7, C7 flat 9, C7 sharp 11, C7 flat 9 sharp 11, C7 flat 13. Those are just a few of the various types of chords found in jazz compositions, and while improvising, a soloist needs to be able to quickly connect to the scales that blend with them. So as you can see, it's important for jazz soloists to be able to quickly match up scales with chords. Now, before I show you how we match them up, let's take a brief look at the conventional approach, part of which uses the Greek modes, which are types of scales. There are 7 of them: the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, and each of those Greek modes or scales match up with particular jazz chords. The Ionian scale matches up with the major 7th chord. The Dorian scale, the Phrygian scale, and the Aeolian scale match up with the minor 7th chord. The Lydian scale matches up with the major 7 sharp 11 chord. The Mixolydian scale matches up with the 7th chord. And the Locrian scale matches up with the minor 7 flat 5 chord. The Greek modes are based on the various degrees of the major scale and are basically easy to learn, but the problem is there are many more types of jazz chords left over that the Greek modes don't cover. Therefore, other scales need to be introduced. For example, the Hindu scale, which matches up with the 7 flat 13 chord. So in order to improvise over a C7 flat 13 chord, the conventional approach requires that we first form a C Hindu scale, which is done by starting on the 5th degree of the F melodic minor scale. The F melodic minor scale is spelled F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E, and F. Then if we build a scale starting on the 5th degree C, we get the Hindu scale. C, D, E, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. You can hear how the C Hindu scale matches up perfectly with the C7 flat 13 chord. The challenge with the conventional approach, however, is that you need to be fairly adept at classical music theory. In that example, you need to remember first that it's the Hindu scale that blends with the 7 flat 13 chord, and then that the Hindu scale is formed by starting on the 5th degree of the melodic minor scale. You'll of course need to be able to construct the proper melodic minor scale, which first requires an understanding of natural minor scales, which also requires an understanding of the key signatures of their relative major scales. It's all doable, but it's quite a process. Our approach, on the other hand, is much simpler. It sets conventional thinking aside and begins by taking a close look at the structure and logic of chord symbols. Let me show you by first going back to our original list of jazz chords. There are actually more of them, but this abbreviated list will do for now. Now, out of all of those symbols, let's find the one symbol that's the most basic, bare-bones looking symbol of all. And here it is, the C with the number 7, the C7 chord. As far as jazz chord symbols go, you can't get any more basic and bare-bones than that, which is why we regard the 7th chord and the 7th scale as the starting point and foundation for all other jazz chords and scales. Although classical theory uses the terms dominant 7th chord and dominant 7th scale to describe them, we regard them simply as the 7th chord and the 7th scale. Now with our approach, you need to remember these two things. First, we regard the 7th scale as a pure, unedited scale which contains a root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and octave. And second, we primarily use only two terms from classical theory, minor 3rd and major 7th. And we pretty much set the other terms aside. We keep the terms minor 3rd and major 7th because they serve an important purpose in the logic and structure of chord symbols. This will start to make more sense once you understand and begin to apply the George's Path scale building rule, which says, when building a scale from a symbol, always begin with the 7th scale and then use the information in that symbol to make adjustments. Now before we talk about that information, let's go back to the basic C7th chord and the basic C7th scale that matches up with it. Now here's something that's important to know. Chords are primarily built from the odd-numbered tones of scales, so playing just the 1, 3, 5, 7 of the C7 scale, C, E, G, B flat, gives us a C7th chord. And this is also important to know. A chord that is built from a scale will blend with it. Now, let's make some music. The first thing to know is that each member of a combo will react differently when seeing a C7 chord symbol in a jazz arrangement. The bass player will use the C7 scale to create a bass line. Then the piano player will use the C7 chord to provide a harmonic background, which is called comping. And then finally, the soloist will use the C7 scale for improvisation. As you can see, a lot of music can be created from knowing what to do with just one single chord symbol. So let's move on and learn more. Now if we take the basic C7 chord symbol and introduce some new information, for example, a lowercase m, we get a C minor 7 chord symbol. Now this added bit of chord symbol information, the lowercase m, will always tell us to do one and only one thing, and that is to lower the third tone of our basic 7th scale by 1/2 step and play the minor third instead of the third. And when we do that, we get a C minor 7th scale. And if we play the odd-numbered tones of the C minor 7th scale, C, E flat, G, and B flat, we get a C minor 7th chord. And it makes perfect sense that they blend with one another. C minor 7 chord, C minor 7 scale. Here's our combo, jamming on C minor 7. Now let's go back to the C7, our foundation chord symbol, and introduce another bit of information, an MAJ. We now have a C major 7 chord symbol. This new bit of information, MAJ, will always tell us to do one and only one thing, and that is to raise the 7th tone of our 7th scale by 1/2 step and play a major 7th instead of the 7th. And when we do that, we get the C major 7th scale. And if we play the odd-numbered tones of the C major 7th scale, C, E, G, and B, we get a C major 7th chord. And again, it makes perfect sense that they blend with one another. C major 7 chord, C major 7 scale. Now in classical theory, that last scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, is known as the C major scale. And classical theory also tells us that when we change the B natural to a B flat, we are going from a major 7th to a minor 7th. And this is the primary difference between our approach and the classical approach. Our approach regards the B flat as simply the 7th, And then when MAJ is inserted in the chord symbol, the seventh gets raised 1/2 step to the major seventh. So our approach looks at the seventh degree of the scale in two ways, either sevenths or major sevenths, and at the same time looks at the third degree of the scale as either the third or the minor third. It's very important to remember that we never use the term minor to describe the seventh degree of the scale, and we never use the term major to describe the third degree of the scale. The logic and structure of chord symbols regards this as the third, and this as the seventh, this as the minor third, and this as the major seventh. Also, here's a helpful hint. The fastest way to find the seventh of any scale is to think of the root tone, which is the name of the scale, as an 8, which it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then count backwards 2 half steps from there. 1, 2. So the seventh of C is B flat. The seventh of F, 1, 2, is E flat. The seventh of F sharp, 1, 2, is E, and so on. It's very important to be able to quickly identify the 9th, 11th, and 13th of each chord and scale. And the easiest way to do that is, again, by thinking of the root tone as an 8, and then counting from there. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So in working with jazz chords and scales, the scale tones can be thought of in two ways. 1 or 8, 2 or 9, 3 or 10, 4 or 11, 5 or 12, 6 or 13. So the 13 of C, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, is A. The 13 of G, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, is E, and so on. Now let's go back to that C7 flat 13 chord scale matchup that we discussed earlier. Remember how the conventional approach had us forming the C Hindu scale by playing the fifth mode of the F melodic minor scale. Here's the F melodic minor scale again. And here's the fifth mode, which is the Hindu scale. Hindu scale, C7 flat 13 chord. Now, let's try it with our approach, which says, when building a scale from a symbol, always begin with the seventh scale, then use the information in that symbol to make adjustments. So we'll begin with the C7 scale, and then look at the added information in the chord symbol, which is a flat 13, and do what it says. Find the 13 and flat it. What's the 13 of C? Remember, think of C as 8 and count up the scale from there. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. C, D, E, F, G, A. The 13 of C is A, which we need to flat. So here's our basic C7 scale. And here's our basic C7 scale with a flat 13. C, D, E, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. The same exact notes as the Hindu scale, but much easier to figure out. Also, instead of calling it a Hindu scale, we actually name it the C7 flat 13 scale, for two reasons. First, it makes it easier to remember matchups. C7 flat 13 chord, C7 flat 13 scale. And second, when you pronounce the name of the scale, you remind yourself how to build it. C7 flat 13? Let's see. Just play the C7 scale and flat the 13. Got it. This same approach can be applied to other jazz chords. So let's go back to that chord list that the Greek modes left behind. C7 flat 9 chord and scale, C7 sharp 11 chord and scale, C7 flat 9 sharp 11 chord and scale, C minor with a major 7 chord and scale, C7 flat 9 flat 13 chord and scale, C major 7 with a flat 13 chord and scale, C major 7 sharp 11 chord and scale, the C7 sharp 9 chord, C diminished 7 chord, and the C7 sharp 9 sharp 11 chord all match up with the C7 flat 9 sharp 11 scale. The C7 sharp 9 flat 13 chord matches up with the C7 scale with 4 color tones: flat 9, sharp 11, and flat 13. And finally, the C minor 7 flat 5 chord matches up with the basic C minor 7 flat 5 scale, which contains a lowered third and fifth. However, in order to avoid the step-and-a-half jump from the flat 5 to the 6th, we can also lower the 6th tone of the scale, as well as the 6th and 2nd tone together, without affecting the chord scale matchup. So with our approach, the only scale that you have to memorize is the 7th scale, and then all the rest of the information you need is right there in the chord symbol. Just a few more things, however, before we conclude. When you see a +7 or augmented 7 chord symbol, think of it as a 7 flat 13. Also, think of 7 flat 5 chords as 7 sharp 11s, and major 7 flat 5 chords as major 7 sharp 11s. And one last thing about chord symbols. The most common way of writing a minor 7th chord symbol is with a single lowercase m and a 7. However, you may also see it written as a min7 or with a minus sign and a 7. For major 7 chords, you'll most often see an maj7, but you'll occasionally see it as a capital M7 or with a triangle and a 7. A circle with a 7 or dim7 indicates a diminished 7th chord, and a circle with a slash through it and a 7 indicates a half diminished 7th chord, which actually is the same as a minor 7 flat 5 chord. I realize that all of this content may seem a bit overwhelming, but the lessons in part 2 of my course start you from scratch and then slow walk you through all of it. You'll also learn to improvise with the various jazz scales using the play-along audio tracks that are streamed directly to your mobile device. For a closer look, visit my website at georgespath.com and go to the See How It Works page, and then click on the link, Part 2, Rhythm Studies with Single Scale Improvisation. Then go ahead and print out my free sample packet. You can see how to do that by clicking on the free sample packet guide at the top of my homepage. Also, if you like this video, please let me know, and share it with anyone you know who might be interested in learning this great art of music improvisation. Hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.